Aoife and the Children of Lir. 'Tis a dangerous thing to dismiss somebody with nothing left to lose. Just another wicked stepmother, changer of children to swans, a lost bird herself in a cage not of her choosing. A mere pawn to be shuffled off at the first inkling of wants or desires of her own. How dare she? How very dare she? There was once 2 young girls whose father was slain in battle, and so were fostered out to Darg, a king of ancient Ireland and of the people of the Droichead.Arts.Centre. It was agreed by the 5 great warriors that he would be king, as they all craved a peace, with no more of the showers of blood foretold by whoever. Eve and Aoife were from the island of Arran, and that's as much as we know about that. Eve was beautiful, golden hair and a pleasant demeanour that endeared her to everyone. Aoife was shyer and more inclined to hide in her sister's shadow. Dark brown hair and the colour of peat, grounding her to the very soil, and hazel green eyes carved from the forests of the Burren. When they left Arran, it was Aoife who suffered most with the fears of the unknown and what lay ahead for them. A new family of royal origins and new siblings and surroundings. Aoife's best friends on Arran had been the seabirds and wilderness, to which she felt a natural affinity. Her mother used to laugh at her curious ways and say, "She's for the birds, that one." It had long been planned that Eve, the eldest, would one day marry into a great warrior clan, and so spent her days learning the intricate skills of motherhood. Learning from the teachings of the Danu. Learning how to love unconditionally takes practice and guidance, and starts with oneself. Danu was also a war goddess. We are none of us all one thing, but a mixture of endless possibilities. And so to the house of Darg. Eve was offered in marriage to Lir, to blend 2 families, bind them in blood, and so as to keep peace with the neighbours. This honour separated the sisters, leaving Aoife alone. But not for long, for there soon followed nieces and nephews who visited often. Fionnuala and Aid were first and delighted everyone. Bove, their grandfather, and Lir, their father, and all the men said how sweet they were. Then came the twins, Fiachra and Con. But this was to bring a great tragedy that changed them all forever. Eve died in childbirth. Much was spoken of the grief of Lir and Bove and of her heartbroken children, but nowhere is it written of the grief of Aoife. To lose a sister is to break a bond that started before the thought of each other. A bond made in the ovaries of the first mother, the first grandmother, and the echoes of all femininity. It's as if a raw scar was left on Aoife's heart. A whole world of love and future love cut off with no chance of healing. To wear a wound that stings the every wakening and yet doesn't even warrant a mention? She's given away by men to men as balm for Lir's grief, to children too full of hurt to see her. An invisible elixir, expected to heal others when her own heart is too delicate. How can one heal when their strength is that of feathers? And no place to call home, no nest, no love of her own. This was Aoife's fate. The time trawled on, and Lir stopped seeing Aoife. He unsaw her. He rose and slept in the love of his children. They shared their grief and carried each other with songs and stories of which Aoife could never belong. She took to the bed. "I'm not well," she'd say to rolled eyes and shrugs, and so she was increasingly left alone. When the servants asked what was wrong, she'd quietly mouth the words, "I've lost my voice." Sure, there's no point in talking when no one is listening. This is when she took to wandering the lakes and forests in search of comfort, finding echoes of familiarity in birdsong. Where once she'd listened to skylarks and curlews, now she only heard the cries of the raven, the rook's noisy anger, and here her mind began to wander to strange notions. Damp earth beneath her feet, fingers no longer feeling anything, let alone the cold. Oh, to be free as a bird, to squawk and scream her pain out into the world without so much as a glance from a starling, or to howl openly like the wind, letting it suck the air out of her lungs, taking a portion of grief with it each time. wading into the lake, walking slowly along the soft, silted bed. No need for air when words weren't being spoken. A curious madness took hold of her. What if she killed the children? It would perhaps end all their sorrows. They'd be with their mother, and maybe Lir would turn to her, and then, when there was no one else to comfort him, an ill-formed thought brought her to the surface. White feathers lay damp on the water. She moved with fascination towards the peaceful swans, serenity itself on the surface, but could kill a young one stone dead with its rage. That night, Aoife drew her sword and followed the children into the woods. She was feverish with excitement. Nothing else had livened her veins in so long she couldn't tell her thoughts from her reality, but they were not slender-necked beauties, but laughing children full of innocence and playfulness. Lir's huntsman, who always accompanied the children when out in the woods, looked at her with a furrowed brow. "Why did you bring your sword, Aoife?" "You do it," she hissed. "It's your job. You do it every other day to all manner of other creatures. What's the difference? You killed them. You do it. You killed them." The huntsman looked at her in horror. He moved quickly to remove the sword from her hand. He gathered the children to himself and brought them home, leaving Aoife in the woods by herself. All clarity had gone from her thoughts. She wandered at the edge of the lake with a fire in her head. The cool waters held her fury as she melted in. Fionnuala was wise. She knew something was wrong. The image of her aunt and stepmother standing there with cold black eyes struck a fear in her that gave her many sleepless nights. However, it was still not spoken of, except in the whispers of the servants. More watchful than ever, they all breathed a sigh of relief each day when Aoife would go out into the woods by herself. What use is having magic if not to use it, she thought. Why should she suffer in silence? Was her pain not worthy of mention? Was a threat of violence still not to be relevant? What would it take to be heard? Shh! Shh! Don't you shush me. So one fine day in spring, when the thaw had warmed the soil and the sun made an appearance, she said to Lir, "Today seems like a good day to take a trip to see my father. I'll take the children and perhaps you could follow us." Lir was surprised, but just grateful to see Aoife in a more pleasant mood. "You should smile more. It makes you so much prettier," he replied. Aoife stayed calm, feeling the power of the druid's wand coursing through her, curling in her hand unnoticed by anyone. Giddy with the thoughts of it, she packs the kids up and heads for the lake. Must not look too long into Fionnuala's eyes, for she's watching me. The kids tumbled noiselessly, splashily, towards the still waters, full of innocence and fearlessness for their future. This was it. She took her chance. By the power of the goddess Danu, bring feathers upon skin, keep them in this form, their beauty now new as of swans they're now born. The children cried in surprise, their limbs changing before their very eyes, but it was Fionnuala who cut through the madness of Aoife. Their eyes met, and in a heartbeat Aoife saw her sister's eyes looking back at her just before they faded into the black beads that sat in a swan's head. She spoke. "Why? Why have you done this to us?" Aoife saw what she'd done. What a terrible, terrible thing she had done. "Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know who I am. I don't know. I don't know what I did. I should have just loved you. I just didn't know how." Change it back, please. Our father will be torn apart all over again. It's too late. I have not the power over the druid's wand. I cannot do anything. But I will give you something I've never had. I will give you your voice. It will be your story that will be told for generations. People will come from all round to hear your voices, to sing your story and be forever remembered. That's the least I can do. You have 900 years. 300 years on Loch Derravara, 300 years on the Sea of Moyle, in 300 years on the western shores. I'll have this memory for all eternity. Her moment of lucidity passed and clouded with too long practicing of bad thoughts. Aoife fled the scene quickly onward to Bove's castle with foolish notions of how to avoid consequences. It wasn't me. They were always like that. It's all too late. The rage of her menfolk was swift and merciless. To what do you fear the most, they asked. A demon of the air. Forever an echo of former rage with no release, no serenity, no story. And so it was, and so it will always be. To you we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To you we send up our sighs, mournings and weepings. To you, Aoife, we shout out our rage, take comfort in cold waters, and scream our unheard stories to the wind.
Everyone's looking for someone to blame. Split from her sister, married off to her mister. Yeah. Aoife, what have you done? Really gone blown it now. Silly girl, you silly girl. Shush me, I didn't choose this. Don't you judge me. Really gone blown it now. Aoife, no one showed me the rule book. Just a while.